to its citizens to conduct its business in a courteous and productive manner, showing respect for fellow board members, staff, and citizens. The board asks its citizens to conduct themselves in the same courteous towards both school personnel and each other. As board policy, Robert's Rule of Order will be used to conduct meetings. A moment of silence will be observed before each meeting. In addition to a moment of silence at each meeting held at a school site, the board will recite the Pledge of Allegiance. The boards ask that you check your cell phones and other electronic devices to be certain they are either turned off or on vibrate to avoid interruptions of the meeting. With that, we'll take a moment of silence. All right, thank you. We'll stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, before we get to our agenda adoption, I'd first just like to make a statement on behalf of the board. This board is committed to all of our racial equity policies that we've started, including creating a more diverse workforce and getting bilingual support in our schools, and that has not changed from this board's directive. Before we do agenda adoption, I would like to ask the board to consider waiving policy 2310 for working sessions and allow public comment policy for regular meetings, allowing anyone to speak on any topic for up to 3 minutes on the agenda and at the start of the meeting.
I make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? With that, that will be a amendment to the consent agenda, or amendment to the agenda adoption. Do we have an amendment for that? To adopt the agenda?
I motion to adopt that.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. With that, public comment? Do we have that first? Kate Bollinger, if you please would come to the podium before you speak. I just want to read just the public comments section. The Board of Education is elected representative body of the school district, wishes to provide a forum for citizens to address the board with public comment, to provide an opportunity for input while conducting an orderly meeting. Individuals or groups may be heard by the Board of Education in accordance with that policy. The board will provide an opportunity and an open session at every regular meeting for community members, students, and employees to address the board. A person wishing to address the board on a specific topic or an open session item on a regular meeting agenda must sign up prior to the board's regular meeting by signing his or her name, address, and the agenda topic or topics which he or she wishes to speak. The board chair will recognize the speaker. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes for a regular meeting of the board. When the 3 minutes ends, the speaker must stop speaking immediately. Yielding time to another speaker will not be permitted. Board will not have a discussion with any speaker. No profanity or vulgar language will be permitted or personal abuse against any person. The board vests in its chair and other presiding officer authorities to terminate the remarks of any individual with he or she does not adhere to the rules established above. Matters involving specific employees are protected under state law, and matters relating to specific students are protected under both state and federal law. Public comment should not address any specific confidential student or personnel matter. Complaints concerning any specific employee or student are not permissible during public comment. If you wish to address a matter that may require identifying either a student or an employee, Please first direct your inquiry to the superintendent for assistance on the process to address your concern. Additionally, if there are matters that you wish to present to or give to the board, please hand those items or items to our Chief Communications Officer. He will deliver those items to the board. Citizens may not interrupt, disturb, or disrupt a Board of Education meeting and will be subject to the provisions of General Statute 143-318.17. Nothing in this policy shall prevent the board from limiting public comment at any board meeting. Thank you.
Wait, is this on? Here we go. Thank you for adding public comment to this board meeting. I really appreciate it. My name's Kate Bollinger. I have 2 kids at Cameron Park. And I was one of the people you called back after I left a message for Dr. Word. I missed your call. And partly I'm glad for it because we're not friends. You didn't hurt my feelings in the cafeteria that we need to go have coffee together. You're an elected public official, which is why I'm glad we're having this discussion tonight. I was not at the last board meeting, although I watched the riveting YouTube version of it. And I was deeply disappointed. This board has said that they are committed to racial equity. They have made, I think, steps in that direction with hiring an equity director. But what happened last meeting was distressing to community members and parents who are worried about racial equity in our schools. It seemed out of the blue, and while I understand it would not want you to comment on specific personnel matters, the aftermath has been divisive and unpleasant, and I think this could have been avoided had the board handled this differently. Tradition was cited last meeting, and I would just like to say that traditionally, things like it's been used to uphold the status quo, which all too often is white supremacy. Cameron Park is not immune. None of our schools are immune. And until we take this seriously, which, to be perfectly frank, it does not feel like the 4 men on this school board are willing to do, things won't improve, and it will be worse for all of our kids. It will be worse for the white kids and kids of color. It does not matter. Mr. Atherton, the school board election I followed very closely. I went to the debates, I went to the discussions, and to be perfectly frank, it felt like you rode the coattails of these 3 women to get on this board. And so to come in here and assume that after 10 months you are fit to lead this is stunning to me. And to be perfectly honest, the first thing I thought was that the 3 old boys up here had set you up to take the fall for them so that they could get their ladies back where they belonged, not in charge. Now, the other thing I wanted to address was the superintendent search, which I noticed you used only the pronouns him and he directly after you talked about unconscious bias. And I hope that you will be considering women and people of color for that position. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time. Next, we have Katie Harper.
Thank you. I prepared my remarks with an agenda item in mind. I did not know that we would have the opportunity to address the board on any topic that we wished. So the agenda item that I'd like to speak on tonight is in response to the lottery system. And I do appreciate that this lottery system is in response to a comment that was made 2 weeks ago by a community member. Thank you for listening to that suggestion. But this cannot be the board's only response to the recent incident at Orange High. Is the board still tracking incidents of racial intimidation like you were a year ago? It's been 20 years since I was first studying the achievement gap in graduate school, and I was reading Beverly Tatum's landmark text. So little has changed in 20 years. Why? Perhaps one reason is that school boards across the country are voting on parking lot systems in response to racial intimidation rather than addressing racial intimidation head on. Don't get me wrong, our district is making strides in discussing the achievement gap and in examining factors that contribute to it. But don't stop at the parking lot issue. Educate yourselves if you haven't already. Attend REI and not just the first training. Read Beverly Tatum. Read Nicole Hannah Jones and Erica Green. These journalists and these researchers are writing about the national crisis in education, and they can inform the decisions that you all make in this room if you are willing to listen to them. Lastly, I want to extend a thank you to Ms. Stevens. Thank you for your service to our community as board chair. Thank you for your leadership in passing our district's forward-looking equity policy, and for ensuring that it involved community members and a wide swath of community members, and that it was written in a timely manner with leadership from Hillary McKenzie and the policy committee. You got it done in 6 months, and it's a good thing too, as apparently your term was due to be cut short.
Thank you for your comment. Latondra Strong.
I'm here to talk about equity again. I'll be talking about equity until we have an equity school system. I hope you expect that. And what we witnessed last week was the furthest from equity. I want to share a few suggestions for the way you move going forward. If you notice that you have a vote that's split along gender lines, you might want to stop. You might want to ask some questions. You might want to talk to the board members who have not joined with you. It's an indication that something is not okay. If you have that same that same split along race lines, it's also a sign that you might have a blind spot. And all too often, we think that we know everything, but it's really clear that you don't know everything because you wouldn't have made that decision. And what I find incredibly alarming is the fact that you broke so many policies to pass that. That should have been assigned to you. I mean, when you guys were sitting down and you were thinking of the policies and you had all these rules in place, did you think that all it would take was 4 people to get together and break all those policies? Or was those policies were they intended to be signs that maybe you should do a little bit more talking? Now, some of you board members, when you're running for office and you're going into communities, I hear it all the time that you want to hear from the community. I don't think any one of you, the 4 of you, talked to anybody in the community for that to make that decision, because you would have been warned that it's not okay. It's shameful. It's not a signal of leadership. Nobody would lead in this community, this diverse community, would make a decision the way you did and not speak to anybody else. So I encourage you all to get out of your little circles and start talking to people who may not feel the way you do. Because while you're making decisions, because you have 4 votes, there are mothers that are deeply concerned about what's going to happen to our equity policy. There are people not sleeping at night, wondering what's going to happen. There are kids experiencing racial harassment and racial intimidation in our schools. This isn't a joke. This is not a joke. And it's not for somebody to just show up and think that they can handle it. It takes long studying, long understanding, and reaching out. You have to do better, because our kids are suffering.
Thank you for your comment. Next, we have Heather Redding.
Good evening. As a resident of Orange County, I would like to first discuss item 7E in combination with my public comments. 7E is in regards to the hiring of the juvenile court and school liaison position. I urge you to make whatever decision minimizes the number of children who are adjudicated through our courts as juveniles or adults, and to break the school to prison pipeline. In other words, we need to stop arresting children in school, and as those who are disparately affected are often Black and brown children. And while I'm on the topic of race, I feel we need a board who understands not only the textbook definition of white supremacy, sexism, and institutional racism, but also how they manifest in nuanced ways. So I'm here in solidarity with fellow community members to express my disappointment in the functioning of the school board. We are living in a time when racial sensitivity and racially diverse leadership are critical to equity and social justice, which the board has struggled with in the past and currently. As many of you recall, it took hundreds of speeches before this board banned hate symbols in our classrooms. Today, we have documented incidents of racial discrimination and inequity in our schools. And then on the heels of passing an equity policy, and while searching for a racial equity director and superintendent, Ms. Brenda Stevens is unseated as board chair by a new, inexperienced member whose devotion to racial equity remains dubious. To Mr. Will Atherton and those who voted to install him as chair, the community is beyond disappointed by your presumptuous power grab. We had a chair who, as a person with extensive experience on the board, was well positioned to navigate the county schools through progressive equity policies that require racial and cultural sensitivity, strong leadership skills, and a deep-seated commitment to doing equity work with integrity. Yet, the men on the board found it appropriate to vote her out for reasons that only serve as a smokescreen to some of the racist and sexist microaggressions taking place on this board. The fact Mr. Atherton's description of the future superintendent was laced with male pronouns is just one example of the rampant unconscious bias that we have seen on this board. So Mr. Atherton, you may be generally surprised by the community's reaction to this power shift, but your naivete underlies your inexperience in a position of leadership. I join with others who call for you to take a back seat to those who are more qualified to navigate our county schools through its many equity-related challenges. At minimum, to demonstrate integrity, you should withdraw your name for consideration of any leadership positions when the next board elections are held in July. I would also like to echo the thanks to Ms. Stevens for her leadership on the board and for the work she pushed through in a short amount of time. Thank you for your service.
All right, that's all the public comments. Next item agenda is the consent agenda. Anyone need to pull anything from the consent?
I'm going to pull it if you make the correction as discussed proper. That is correct. All right, I'm fine now.
Can we pull 7E to get a little bit more information about that?
Of course.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda with E pulled?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, with that, can we move to the juvenile court school as a liaison memorandum of understanding?
Sure, Ms. Cobb is prepared to answer any questions you might have.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I think that a little bit more information about it, if you could just sort of give us the broad strokes about it for the community.
It is a juvenile court position. We partner with Chatham County and Chapel Hill Carver City Schools to supply this position, and this person works with students in our school who are juvenile court involved, those who are on diversion plans as well as those who have some court involvement. She provides some counseling to those students. She works with the families and the parents in helping the students stay on track so that they, once they come out of juvenile court, they won't come back to juvenile court again. So it is a juvenile court position.
Support.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Follow-up, do you all do any work through that program with teen court?
I'm sorry.
Do you do any work with the teen court through that program?
Yes, so she works with all the juvenile court counselors as well as teen court. So anything that's dealing with juvenile court, she works with students along those lines.
Which basically gives the first-time offender an opportunity to not get charged with, if they didn't participate in that program, with a potentially serious crime.
Correct. And also, any student in our schools that are at risk, having some difficulty, some behavior issues, they can be recommended to work with the juvenile court liaison, and she will work with the family about different options and resources in the community to keep the student from getting in trouble and getting involved with the court system.
Any other questions from any other board members? Sarah, do you have a question?
I'm just thinking. I guess my question is, how do we sort of evaluate the effectiveness of the position? It sounds like it's a position that's been existing.
Yes.
So how do we sort of evaluate how well it's working?
We look at the number of children that return to the system, back to juvenile court. She does offer programs like in the summertime for students as well. So it's a program to help students kind of get out of that line and hopefully not get in that line if they're on, the borderline or if they're at risk.
I'd be interested in like delving a little bit deeper into this in some future, maybe it's student achievement committee. I'm not sure really what the right committee is, but at some point I'd be interested.
I can get some data for you.
All right, anyone else?
Move adoption of 7E.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Right, next on our agenda is the high school parking lot lottery. Mr. Superintendent?
Thank you, Mr. Atherton. I'll ask Mr. Johnson to come to the podium. As was already stated tonight at our last board meeting, we had an astute suggestion from a member of our community, and Mr. Johnson began really immediately working with both of our high school principals. So I've asked him to come tonight and give an update of the current process at each of our schools and the work he's done thus far on this particular topic. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Good evening. Currently neither high school, Orange High School or Cedar Ridge High School, have a lottery system in place. At Cedar Ridge High School, students are assigned a parking space in numerical order. They're assigned their spaces by office staff. So what I mean by that is 3 students can walk in together and they will get parking space 11, 12, and 13 back to back to back. At OHS, at Orange, students are allowed to pick their spaces. They pick their spaces off of a map of the parking lot. We've had both principals had conversations and they both agree and are interested in moving to a lottery system for student parking at this school. We also agreed together that we'll take some time over the summer and just work out the logistics around a lottery system at the schools.
I think there's just some other considerations that we've had Sarah Pitts to take a look at, just the size of parking spaces, turn radiuses, that sort of thing, as we think about what size vehicles can fit in parts of our parking lot and how we spread that out. We're also taking into consideration, there are times where, for example, athletes have parked closer to the building because we may have female students that are walking out of the high school late in the evening after a practice, and so we're thinking about safety. So those are just some kind of detailed considerations that we're working through to make sure we have a lottery system that not only is a true lottery system, but also provides a level of safety in the parking lot as well.
Yes, Hillary?
So this afternoon, I have heard some rumors about there potentially being problems with students walking from buses into the buildings at drop-off and pickup. And so I'm wondering if we're going to tweak this over the summer. That makes sense to me since we'll be descending towards the end of the summer. But what are we doing in the meantime to assure safety in the parking lot now?
Well, you know, the parking lot is being monitored by our deputies. We always have staff out there doing dismissal, as well as we have assistant principals down in the bus line in the morning.
Okay.
And we are immediately upgrading camera system in the parking lot, actually adding additional surveillance cameras in Orange High School's parking lot right away. I'm not sure which school you're referring to, or if that's something, you know, that would be greater detail that we could follow
Sure.
up on.
I don't have a lot of detail. I think that it was about Orange High. So maybe we can talk to staff and discuss if we need any extra support in the
Sure.
parking lot.
Okay.
Thanks.
As we're reviewing it, that one thing that I think is important that we remember, even though we had the problem with the unfortunate problem with a group of students, there are other group of students that, for their emotional well-being, either in the morning or the afternoon, they want to park close to somebody they know to get them off to a good start in the morning. And I would hope that we may figure out a way to address that. That there are some reasons why a student wants to park next to somebody else. Maybe it's that they just say, hey, I'll walk in with you, and so it's not a rough time going in. And I hope that we can discuss that, so.
Maybe we can talk with students and pull different sections of students about, I don't know, maybe.
We've had that conversation today about taking input from students.
Great.
It's actually on, I've got one more superintendent student advisory council meeting at each high school before the school year's up, and that's on my list of topics to talk to them about.
Great.
I hope we can give a priority assessment to security cameras that may not be working, should, in my opinion, receive top priority to be fixed or replaced immediately. And also, are there security cameras at Cedar Ridge? It's a long stretch to get to the student parking lot at Cedar Ridge, as it is as Orange, but you've got a more elevated position at Orange High School with the campus than you do at Cedar Ridge. So I would hope that we have a camera assessment done before the beginning of the new school year, and
So-
make sure everything is where it's supposed to be.
Excuse me. So there are 2 cameras in the parking lot at Cedar Ridge High School.
There are 2.
And currently, the principal is very satisfied with the scope of the
Good.
cameras.
Good. Have they fixed the one at Orange High? No, let's have a talk.
Do you have anything, Sarah? I also have heard, as Hillary has, about kids getting on and off the bus as well. I've also heard about loud, intimidating music as well when this is occurring. So I would like to make sure, as we look at this as well, what other things we can do, especially as we close out the school year. Is there some way to, you know, have someone monitor it a little closer and make sure what's going on before we make the recommendations? You know, as we go into this lottery system, I want to make sure that we're accounting for all of these things, especially, you know, some kids that need an extra friend as well. At the same time, making sure we're protecting all of our students.
Certainly something we can take a look at and evaluate. This is the first time staff is hearing these concerns tonight.
We've been getting a lot of input.
Great.
All right.
As you get it, we would love to have it.
All right. All right. There's no action on this agenda item. We'll move forward to mental health awareness. Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Good evening again. So Children's Mental Health Awareness Month is May, and this month the official day was May 9th, and students and staff around the district wore green in honor of Children's Mental Health Awareness. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that we've done and give a few statistics. 13% of children between the ages of 8 and 15 experience a mental health condition, and 1 out of 5 children in one given year will have some sort of mental health condition. When you look at those kinds of numbers, you see why we are doing the things that we're doing in Orange County schools to support children's mental health. So, I have a few pictures just to show you some of the things that the students and staff did this year. There were library displays, Hillsborough Elementary School students. This is a picture of them and teachers wearing green. Partnership Academy did some community circles. Cameron Park had boards. Students wore green, Grady Brown. They sent in pictures of their boards, and Central Elementary as well. We had Eflin Cheeks did bulletin boards. They all were doing circles and informative sessions for students as well as families around Mental Health Awareness Month, and trying to take the stigma away from mental health awareness and children getting mental health. And this is just a slide showing some of the different activities that have been going on all month. So next I wanted to share some of our data. So in Orange County schools, the school counselors, social workers, and nurses collect data on the different reports that we have to make on students. So in one of our reports, we have had 239 different instances where we have had reporting to EMS, DSS, mobile crisis, and or a suicide assessment of a student. So if you look at that, A.L. Standback has had about 50 different instances of reporting, followed by Eflin Cheeks, followed by New Hope and Cameron Park. Those are just our top 4. The next slide talks about, out of those 239 reporting incidents, 165 of those were suicide assessments. When you look at that, the red, which is 41.8%, about 69, that's a mild assessment of suicide that has been done in the school. Our high risk, there have been 16 in our district this year. We've had some increase from 2018-19, but it has been minimal compared to some of the other school districts around us. The next slide talks about, out of those 239 instances, how many times we've had to contact the mobile crisis unit for support for our students. So it's only been 4.2%. So 95% of the time, 96% of the time, we've not had to contact mobile crisis unit, but 10 times, if you want to just know in numbers, we've had to contact mobile crisis unit to support students and staff. Out of that 239, 198 times we have referred students to our school-based mental health services. And that's through a school-level crisis. The numbers don't show that there were, in our district right now, we have 415 students that are receiving school-based mental health therapy through Renaissance Wellness Services, who we contract or we have an MOU with. Now, this includes students without insurance. That is very key to this whole thing. So our company that we use, we have an MOU and an understanding with them that for all the students that we help get mental health services, we still have students who don't have insurance and cannot afford to go to a mental health provider. So they provide that service for those students at no cost. So total right now, Orange County Schools has 462 students receiving services. And that's about 2 therapists at every school with 1 intern that's serving each school across the district. So our numbers would be much higher if we did not have that school-based mental health service going on in our school. And this is just another slide talking about some of our data around the United States around mental health. The last slide is Hillsborough Elementary School, and it's just their bulletin board that they put up this month, and it says, "Don't let stress weigh you down, just keep swimming." Questions?
Sarah?
Question. Thank you for sharing that information with us. I feel like it's really, really important for the board to know about this, and I'm glad that we have the Renaissance support in schools including for students who don't have insurance. I'm wondering, and I know you don't have it right here, but I'm wondering if you look at these kind of incidents broken down by different identities, by race, by gender, by, I don't know what kind of information we have about the gender identity or.
Yes, I have it by race, by gender, all of that.
And do you know if you see are there any like trends in that, or is it sort of?
It's really not a lot of, it's not a lot of trends in it. It just depends on what the kid is going through. Kids are just having a lot of different things, experiencing things that I think we have not, speaking for myself, aging myself, have not experienced growing up as a youth. And so the numbers don't show that it's more African American kids or more Hispanic kids. The numbers don't show that.
I went to a conference maybe 6 months ago, and the suicide attempt rate for trans students was astronomical. It was really upsetting, which is why I was wondering.
Yes.
That's one of the reasons I was asking.
But I can review that data and give it to you.
I just wanted to take a moment to commend Ms. Cobb, for developing this partnership with Renaissance and really expanding the mental health services. When you think about the number of adults we have in our buildings now that are able to provide a lot of these services for free for our families that otherwise our students wouldn't have access to, really Ms. Cobb worked really hard on that partnership and is working right now on a partnership for day treatment, which we've talked about previously as a board as well. So just trying to continue to expand our services.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Cobb. All right, next on the agenda, the information technology salary alignment.
Good evening, board members. The item we have before you is kind of a personnel housekeeping item. As you may know, the network manager is the top technical resource in most IT organizations of our size. And in our case, we also have a senior network analyst who works closely with the network manager. But generally, the top technical resource is considered the network manager. With the recent retirement of our network manager, who's been here with us, I think, for about 9 years, in preparing to do a search for a new candidate, I recognized that the salary grade for the network manager position is actually below that of the senior network analyst. That would make it very difficult for us to do any kind of recruiting or to consider any internal promotions, since the likely candidates would actually be at a slightly higher band. So with that, I've come before the board to see if you all will consider the approval of upgrading that position, the salary band, from its current 74 level to a 78, which would put it a pair of bands above the existing senior network analyst position, which is the 76.
Any questions? Can you tell me if there's going to be any immediate budget impact by making this, or this is a future, this is a change to have the potential to make more?
We're not anticipating that. The previous individual that was the network manager had extensive experience, not just in K-12, but in public education, which bumped him considerably up into that salary range. So this should still be well within the range of what we're looking for.
Sir, you had a question?
That was going to be my question.
Anybody else? Okay, this is an action item. Do we have a motion to approve this?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Summer facilities project update.
Welcome Dr. Henry back to the podium. I know he has missed that spot. So tonight we are doing a pretty good overview of a number of summer projects. Many of these, there will be contracts that will come before you in the coming month. Some of those we'll be asking you to approve that night. So we felt like tonight it was important to give you a good rundown of the scope of the work, so that when you see the contract for the first time that you have an idea and an understanding of the work that's ahead. Dr. Henry.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As Dr. Ward said, the intent here is to provide some context for you so that when these projects are brought before you over these next couple of weeks, you'll understand why we're bringing them when we are and asking for approval on that night. And also because we have a short timeline, and so we want to get to work as quickly as possible on these projects to complete them before school starts next fall, or shortly thereafter if they have to extend slightly in the school year. So the first project I want to talk to you about tonight is the roof replacement at Cameron Park. So currently we have 3 roofing projects that are out for bid. One is at Cameron Park, and one is at Orange High School, and the other is at Central Elementary. And all 3 of those schools are on the same timeline. We did a pre-bid meeting today, and we'll be opening those bids on June 3rd. And so once we receive the bids, we'll of course check them against the specs, and then we'll identify the group that will perform the construction. Our goal, we would love to be able to bring to you contracts on June the 10th, but the likelihood of that happening is pretty small. It'll more likely be June 24th. If we are able to get finalized contracts on the 24th, we'll get to work right away. There's a chance it would be the 10th, but it's a very small chance. At Cedar Ridge High School, we are in the process right now of receiving bids for the construction work to begin there. We're eager to get that work started as soon as possible. We will open those bids Thursday night. Again, it would be nice to be able to bring a contract for that construction work on June the 10th, but that's going to be a big one that we'll really have to certify against the specs to make sure that we choose the appropriate partner to do the construction. More than likely, it'll probably be June 24th. I had a conversation today with Corley Redfoot about that project and another one, potentially June 10th, but probably June 24th, and then we'll begin construction as quickly as we can once that contract is in place. I mentioned already the roofing project at Central Elementary. That'll be on the same timeline as Cameron Park. Corporate Drive, the renovation, we are also we're accepting bids right now for the construction work to begin there. Those bids will be open on May the 30th, and I did, in my conversation with Corley Redfoot today, we do have a chance that we can be a little more aggressive with that timeline. I think we have a pretty good chance of bringing that contract to you on June the 10th. We do have a little bit of sense of urgency there because we really would like to get as much of that completed this summer so that the public-facing portions of the building will be be open for business before the school year begins, so families would be able to begin using that as a resource center before school begins. Obviously, we want to weigh that with making sure the work is done well and that we're not just rushing to have it done. But if we are able to have a contract in place on the 10th, we have a pretty good shot of making that timeline. Otherwise, it will be the 24th that will bring that construction contract to you and ask you for approval that evening. New Hope Elementary School, I have that contract and it will be ready for June 10th. I just have to review it. We are doing some upgrades to the HVAC system there, replacing 5 air handler units. We should not have an issue with starting that work pretty quickly after school is out, and it should be completed in time for school to begin. Orange High, we continue to chip away at the geothermal project. We're hoping to complete the 100 wing and the basement of the 300 wing this summer, and also to have a portion of their roof replaced on the same timeline as Cameron Park and Central Elementaries. The other items that we'll be bringing to you outside of the realm of construction, these are service contracts. Both our grounds maintenance and our custodial services contracts expire this June, and so we will be looking to enter into new contracts for the beginning of the school year. Currently, we are working with Core Management to review the bids that have come in for both of these contracts. We'll be spending some time reviewing those bids, interviewing potential partners for the upcoming, for the upcoming 3 years for the life of the contract. We have some work to do on those in terms of negotiating the price. We do anticipate costs to be higher than the current contract. Custodial contract does include some changes from where we're at currently, including servicing an additional school, providing more supervision and management during the evening when majority of the work is done in the schools, and also we have put in a wage increase. There was not a set wage in the previous contract, and we anticipate that will contribute to cost increase. So those bids are being reviewed. We'll set up an interview process. Potentially, we could bring that to you on the 10th, but it may be the 24th as well before we'll have that one ready. And the same for the custodial grounds, the grounds maintenance contract. We are adding additional schools and some additional space, but again, depending on cost, we'll have to look very carefully at that and see if we're able to do all that we intended to do in the bid. We may have to pull some of the items out if it's just too expensive. But we'll continue to monitor that and update you as we proceed. Be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Matthew? Dr. Henry, on the grounds maintenance, are you gonna work on getting some seeding on our bare spots and maybe get the height of the grass that they mow a little bit higher?
Yeah, seeding is definitely a part of the overall contract.
Thanks.
And I did neglect to mention, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, in terms of the Cameron Park, there are a number of projects in the future for Cameron Park. We are working with the design firm right now on finalizing a contract. Once we have that contract finalized, again, will likely be brought to you on June the 10th. They will begin designing all of the various construction projects that will be occurring in Cameron Park in the near future. So once we have the design contract in place, they can begin creating the designs, at which point we can then start getting the construction work to begin. So we hope to have that for you on June 10th, so we can begin that process as soon as possible as well.
Sir, I just have a question. I have a question and a request. So the question is, can you remind me or just update me on what is the timeline for finishing the geothermal project at Orange High? And then the request is, because I know there's many members of the public here, and you mentioned the corporate drive piece and wanting to have it open for the start of the school year. Could you just sort of quickly summarize what the plan is with that building?
Sure. I'm gonna ask. I don't want to misspeak on the end timeline for the geothermal, so I'm going to ask for help from Roger and Nick.
Yes. While Nick's coming, is it okay if I answer the corporate drive? Just, so the community understands we are working on a very public-facing, one-stop shop for families and parents. Currently, right now, we have departments like child nutrition, school community relations, student assignment. They're all in very different locations across our system, some of which are in our schools, in the basement of Orange High School. So on the top level, which will be the main entrance to the corporate drive facility, all of those things will be together. So as a new parent or an existing parent that may have needs, registration for after-school programs, summer camps, child nutrition needs, questions about student assignment, all of those things will be there, as well as kind of a parent resource center as you walk in the front of that building. In the bottom level of that will be our curriculum and instruction department, which also interfaces quite a bit with those departments. That makes it much easier for a family to be able to access all of those departments as opposed to having to jump around to different locations around the system.
December of 2021. I do want to publicly say Sarah Pitts and Roger Ivy, Nick Mincy, Valerie Green, all the folks in the operations department have done a phenomenal job over the past 4 months while I've been away, and they've done a great job of helping bring me up to speed. So just wanted to acknowledge them publicly.
Anybody else? All right, I just had a couple of questions. For the corporate drive renovation, what will happen to the space that's going to be left available after it's moved, people move into corporate drive? Like the after-school location over across from ALC and that. Have we thought about what we're going to do with those spaces? If not, I definitely would like to know at some point.
Yeah, that's probably the one place that we have not thought about, just because I think we probably need to do assessment of the life of that small house where school community relations is and how feasible that is to use the annex where curriculum instruction is right now. Our technology department will move there. That will become a data center as well as house Todd Jones's staff, which gets them out of the basement of Orange High School. Right, and it frees, so that's the other testing and accountability, child nutrition services, and the technology department will come out of Orange High School, which frees up some additional classroom space and office space for the staff at Orange High.
Excellent. All right, thank you. I know Cameron Park, the air handlers are being done, and the mechanicals is for air quality. Is the New Hope air handler system for air quality as well?
So there's multiple multipurpose for the repairs to New Hope. The age of that building, those units are about senior lifespan. Several of the units are just, they're going first. These are the first in many. And so a few of the units could potentially pose a threat towards some air quality issues if we don't get on top of it. That's what we're trying to do.
Excellent. And it will have dehumidification capabilities as
Yes,
well?
we will. We have been working with an engineer from DPI, Matthew Ward. And Matthew has designed the system so that we've changed those air handlers and brought them up to current standards. We are changing the methods for dehumidification in the building.
Thank you. And then the last question I had is on the custodial contracts. Are we looking at the current quality of service that we're getting in all the schools? I've gotten lots of mixed messages from parents,
Absolutely.
teachers, staff about what we're getting today. So is that going to feed into it and we have some better measurements on making sure all of our schools are clean?
Absolutely, and that's the purpose. We're working with core management through the interview process and through the review of the bids that are coming in. And they actually helped us write the specs for the bidders to ensure that quality is what we want it to be.
Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry.
So that's gonna entail, we in Orange County have the Orange County living wages that we adopted, so we're gonna try to ensure that actually meet those companies that are setting those bids out, meet those requirements, correct?
We will, I mean, you can speak to that, Jake, if you want.
Yeah, so we did, when we worked with core management on writing the specs, what we did put out was that there would be a minimum wage of $10 an hour. I know it's not quite at the living wage standard, but that is what is in the specs.
So I think last time too, we priced out for the board when we did the last contract that showed what minimum wage would be versus living wage. And then we'll just see where that fits within the budget that we have for the service.
All right, any other questions from anybody? All right, I do believe there's going to be more detail in the budget committee meeting. That's on the 17th. Is the upcoming meeting. Is that where you're going to bring in more information about the bids?
So we'll bring those to the board meeting.
Okay, excellent.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, Dr. Newman.
Yes, sir.
All right, next agenda item is the Board of Education meeting calendar for next year.
So before you tonight is the 2019-2020 meeting calendar that Ms. Coleman has worked to put together. There are a few things that I want to point out. It is consistent for the most part of the months. So there are two meetings, a regular meeting and a work session. There is only an organizational meeting in July. The meetings that do not have the months that don't have two meetings are November, as we schedule around not only the holiday, but the North Carolina School Boards Association annual conference. That was staff thought was a wonderful suggestion that Ms. Stevens made last year to have one board meeting in November. So we kept that consistent. And then, as always, in December, based on the winter break, we have one board meeting. The other point to make is in January, you will notice, and we were given the feedback to try to schedule around teacher work days. However, if you look at the schedule, when Martin Luther King holiday falls, the work session in January would fall on a mandatory teacher work day. I mean, I will tell you that has little impact for the staff that comes to board meetings and is here tonight. But that is, I mean, the options there would be to run back-to-back weeks of board meetings, have one board meeting in January, or to keep it there on the workday, which, as I've stated, is okay with staff, but certainly that we're open to board feedback on that. But I think those are the general kind of points to make about the calendar, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so I have a lot of feedback about this calendar. The first thing, I would like to have Columbus Day scratched from the calendar. I don't know why we're pointing that out. It has no importance to me whatsoever to be on there. The other thing is there are federal holidays on here, which I understand, but Good Friday is not a federal holiday and Easter Easter Sunday is not a federal holiday. So if we're putting that on there, we need to be adding every holiday. So my suggestion would be to take those off. Also, Christmas Day holiday should probably just say holiday. And then I think we touched on the other thing, which was mandatory as a work day. So those are my main takeaways.
Sarah?
I'm noting the July board meeting just says regular meeting, but I think it should probably say organizational meeting, if that's the term. And then, I'm curious, the teacher workday thing, like, is there, I know we have these meetings on Mondays. Is there a reason we don't have one on a Tuesday or something? I mean, I'm fine also with having it on the Monday, but just for future reference. Is there a reason we don't ever have meetings on like a Tuesday sometimes?
I couldn't speak to that. I mean,
Okay.
since my 4 years here, they've always been on Mondays. There's certainly more historical
Right.
knowledge here than mine.
But, you know, that's just our meeting day, because you have to consider, in this town, we have a lot of boards and such, and they all have their day. So Monday is our meeting day. But I'd like to comment on something that Dr. Word said. I made a comment to you regarding having a board meeting on that teacher work day, and that's probably why you, because I'm not in favor of it. Because if we're not working, then I would rather not put the staff to that. So I'm in favor. I think we have 4 committee meetings in addition to 2 board meetings. So I think we might could make it without one.
So my only thought on that possibly is just thinking about the things that may be happening around then. And I don't have the exact timeline for the student reassignment work and all of that in front of me, but I think I remember that some of that was coming in January. So if we did scratch something like that, then I think we probably just have to be open to like scheduling additional if we needed to in January. Only having one in January feels like it could potentially be tough there, but I'm curious. I'm not as in the timeline as maybe you are, Dr. Word.
So policy requires that you pass new student attendance lines by January. The timeline that we've been working on, and we are well on that timeline, is for the board to approve new boundary lines sometime in October or November. While policy says January, we have felt like as a staff all along that the sooner that happens, the better for families that may be reassigned to a different school. Point well taken, but I think our timeline we never wanted to get all the way till the deadline of January to approve that.
So would the board be open to moving that meeting to a different date? Or, I think we're gonna have a lot going on. We've got a lot of stuff we wanna cover. So, to your suggestion, Sarah, the Tuesday meeting?
Oh, it was more of a sort of a curiosity. I don't have a very strong feeling about this particular meeting.
I know,
In any
I'm just trying to see
Yeah.
what the feel is from the board, given everything we've got in our pipeline to get done.
And I always said that out of consideration of staff. We have, as I said, we have 4 committee meetings, and I try to make most of the board members do. So we have 4 committee meetings in addition to our board meeting. But I'm not married to, this is not a cross I'm going to, okay?
All right,
I do have more conflicts on Tuesday.
Yeah, that's right. Well, then, that's when we'll have the meeting.
Thank you.
awesome. All right.
I would suggest that we either keep it or we don't keep it and not move it. Just keep it.
I agree.
So how many of our schools right now being used as polling places?
4.
And how does that fit into the calendar?
This is just the board meeting, it's not the.
Well, I know it's just a board meeting, but, we've had situations where the Board of Elections is constantly finding new polling places. And there's been talk over the years of the disruption that takes place on school property when people are coming in and out, security issues and
been any discussion with the county folks about this?
Yeah, I mean, Jason could talk about what the calendar committee talked about with regards to election day, because I think that was a topic when you were working with calendar committee. I think we have looked at presidential elections specifically, and trying to look at those years, because that seems to be the most disruptive year. Jason, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Oh, well, you're absolutely correct. So for this upcoming school year, the calendar committee was comfortable having school on election day, but they really want to dig in during the 2020 election trial, maybe adjusting that down.
All right, any other comments?
So when we bring this back, we will make the noted changes from tonight and before we ask you to vote on it.
So is there consensus around the second meeting in January? Is there?
Keep the keep.
I would just be considerate of the staff.
You can keep it, and if you don't need it, you can just cancel it. That option is always available.
All right, no action on this agenda item. Next agenda item is the board attorney report and updates.
No report, thank you.
All right. With that, the next item is closed session for the board.
I'll motion to move into closed session.
But you gotta read,
Oh,
Read
you've gotta read something.
yes, yes, I will, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, closed session pursuant to NC General Statute 143-318.11, A1, A3, and A6 to consult with the attorney as needed to preserve the attorney-client privilege to consider confidential personnel matters and to prevent the disclosure of personnel information that is privileged or confidential under NC General Statute 115C-319, and student information that is confidential under the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, 20 U.S. Code 1232G, and to discuss with the board attorney a pending lawsuit in the case of Jerome Seymour versus Orange County Board of Education et al. 18-CVS-1029.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Board is in closed session.